In an ever-evolving world of learning and development, the journey of navigating challenges, embracing new strategies, and staying ahead of the trends is both an art and a science. Today, we are thrilled to bring you insights from someone who has been on this journey. Welcome back to GydeBites, where we deliver big insights in small bites. I'm Prasanna, and today we'll talk about the lessons that Amy has learned during her stints in the field of learning and development. Amy Titus is a retired managing director from Deloitte Consulting who has led multiple learning, transformation, and leadership programs. Now she is leading Alair Consulting, a management consulting firm. Amy, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Well, thank you. And it's very much a pleasure for me as well. I'm very excited.
Same here, Amy. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to ask you first question, right? Given your vast experience managing these learning transformation programs, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have faced in L&D and how that has helped you grow professionally?
It's always an interesting question to think about challenges because you always come up with so many. But if I were to boil it down, it would be two. And that is managing the client. It's very basic, but they have expectations and they're not always realistic and they've got to be managed. And so that's always a challenge because you've got to have them with you as you go through designing the learning and you go through actually delivering it. Because sometimes they say, oh, I know the problem. There's no need for needs analysis. Let's just go straight to the solution. Well, we know that's not learner centered. Or they'll say, will you develop a learning program that motivates them? Well, again, motivation comes from within. It's not something that's given through a learning program. So it's a matter of working with these clients and helping them understand what really can be done and getting them very excited about it. The other challenge is managing myself, managing my own expectations. Because you go in and you say, oh, this is such a wonderful opportunity. But sometimes the client doesn't want to be as innovative as you want to be. Or there's the realities of corporate politics, of business politics, of developing a program. And then they say, oh, I'm not sure we're going to roll out that product after all, after you've done all that work. Or, oh, a little bit of our direction has changed. And you just have to say, everybody's learned in this process of developing the program, so it's still positive, but I have to understand that. So those are really the two biggest challenges that I have faced throughout my career.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, a lot of times we hear that, right? I mean, we have rolled this out. I mean, we have developed this, but we somehow we could not roll it out to the users. Somehow it was not made live at any point in time. So double clicking a little bit on that. So what are your go-to strategies in a way for making the real impact in L&D? Because always these bottlenecks and these bureaucracies and everything plays an important role, but at the same time we have to be making an impact on what we want to do, right? So can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So the first thing I do is think about learning and development as an ecosystem. A lot of people write about, oh, well, learning and development have to be aligned with the business. Okay, that's correct, but it's bigger than that. It really has to embrace the bigger picture of the business, of the culture, and make sure there's alignment with the people culture, not just the business culture. It's not just necessarily achieving what those business goals are, but the learning ecosystem has to take into consideration what are the motivations of employees? What do they want? What do the clients of the company want? And so that learning takes a much broader picture today of the ecosystem. So I bring that perspective as my first go-to strategy and really try to get the business to understand that learning is one of its key drivers in its ecosystem. That a business that's not continuously learning is not going to survive. Learning really today is a major component of survival. My second go-to strategy is I try to get everybody really excited about what we're going to be doing. So that means doing maybe a little less than you want to do, but when you do it, it's got everybody involved. People want to be engaged. They talk about it, they share about it. And that's how you don't have to do that old push of getting of getting people involved in the learning, but really they're pulling it. And that's through the excitement that I talk about. And that really goes to, and probably tied to it, but is don't overpromise. Don't overpromise. Don't say, oh, this is going to solve those problems or this is going to be great. Just be very realistic, because what's that phrase? Something like the perfect, oh, isn't good is better than perfect. I know
Yeah.
there's a great phrase about that. That's far more eloquent than what I'm saying. But that's another one of my go-to strategy is, and by that way, you can involve everybody and be able to have them incorporate their thinking into it, because it's not going to be perfect. And the last, my go to strategy is to make sure that I am and my team is abreast of the latest trends, so that we are demonstrating to our organization or our clients that we are aligned with the latest thinking. We're aligned with their thinking. We're aligned with the trends of the business. So it's really, that's very important, is staying abreast of those trends.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it literally sort of, I was going to ask you next about two things, right? You mentioned don't overpromise, and how do you keep yourself in the know of latest things, right? So, I mean, how do someone who is sort of leading these learning programs, how do they keep themselves abreast with the new trends, technologies, AI, and everything? And how do they not overpromise in a way as well?
Yeah. Well, let's think about overpromising first, because it has to do with resources, people's time, people's commitment, and those are all real factors that also come into play when you want to stay abreast and incorporate new technologies. But it's talking to people and saying, what is the real problem we're trying to solve here? And getting them to focus on that. Because sometimes they go in and they say, I want a big program that's going to transform how people are doing their work. We're going to be more efficient. We're going to bring in AI. And so I say, all right, that sounds good. That sounds great, because you want people to be excited, right? But I ask them, what problem are you trying to solve? And they sit there and they go, oh, you know, I really think we need to be a little bit more innovative in this particular part of our business. And so then you can begin to narrow and hone in more on what really needs to be done in the program. And you're not trying to boil the ocean or trying to, as I said, overpromise in something that isn't specific enough. And
Mhm.
also, sometimes I try to break it down. I say, all right, well, so you want to roll out a program where first you're going to get everybody to be digital in the company, and then you want to get them to be AI literate. Well, let's not do it all together.
Yeah.
Let's think about, again, what are some of the problems that you're trying to solve? What do our clients want from us? Let's think about that in terms of designing this particular program. And also, we want people to be comfortable. We want our leaders to be comfortable with talking about AI and using it, because that's often one of the challenges, is that decision makers don't always understand what some of these technologies are or some of these new trends are in the marketplace. And so they may have unrealistic expectations, or just not um, accurate expectations where the technology is today. So it's a matter of involving them and making sure they're educated. So that's part of what I talk about. I'm not overpromising.
Yeah.
You don't want people to feel, oh, we can't do that. What? We can't. get everybody up to speed. We can't transform ourselves in 3 months. No, but let's take it step by step.
Uh,
And let's
uh,
think again of that ecosystem, right?
yeah,
Uh, but it's really fun, I think, to try to get yourself, your team, your clients to stay abreast of, as you said, stay up to date with what's going on. And one of the what we call innate human capabilities that I
mhm,
don't know if AI is ever going to have it is curiosity. So
yeah,
really try to get people to be curious. Why is what's going on going on? How do I learn more about it? And what are the new technologies? And specifically with my team and myself, I have always tried to be sure that we're reading, we're listening to webcasts, webinars, we're listening to podcasts, we're going to conferences, and I try to encourage people to also blog because
yeah,
once you have to create, you learn. And
yeah,
once you have to help others understand, you also learn. And the other way is to also listen to your clients. What are their trends? What are they grappling with? And try to understand it from the business perspective, because that way you'll never get stuck in your own, what I call echo chamber, the
yeah,
learning echo chamber of how something gets done. But you really have it both in that business perspective, but also within the ecosystem perspective that I talked about in the beginning. And it's fun though to be always learning. I mean, if you're in learning, generally you like to learn.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's one other piece here, though. So when I start feeling like I'm running onto something that I'm just a little uncomfortable with, I ask myself, am I confronting something right? I'm afraid to learn, or I don't feel
yeah,
I have. I'm not. It's a lack of comfort, and so I try to understand that because I'm sure others have that as well. Maybe not in the same space, um, and is something hard about where some things are easy for somebody and hard for others to learn. And when you see somebody else learning it easily, you go, oh, why don't I'll just wait till they make it an easy button that I can just hit and I don't have to learn it anymore. But it's really to stay abreast of trends, you got to feel a little uncomfortable too and push yourself.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. One of the things that stuck with me was like you mentioned, like we want to use AI. So I was talking to someone and they said that, oh, we have a strategy that we have to use AI. I asked them for what. They said, no, we don't know, but we everyone is using Gen AI. We would also want to use that and grow and progress. I said, okay, that's good to know, but you have to narrow down to the problems or the challenges that you want to solve. So that sort of perfectly resounded the discussion that I'm having as well. So coming to the next topic that we would like to touch upon is there are a lot of misconceptions about L&D, what it brings to the table, and so on. Do you want to sort of debunk the common ones for our viewers and listeners?
Sure. Well, I'm going to do this historically so that people can get a perspective of how we've grown and how we've changed. But it used to be, I know about learning. I went to school. So we don't need any learning experts. I went to school. I know how people learn, and we all know that that is not true. There's
Yeah.
pedagogy and there's andragogy to begin with, and there's also incredibly creative innovation going on for kids now in schools of using all kinds of different tools and having them learn together. And so the way that you may have learned in school isn't necessarily the latest today either, but it
Uh,
certainly doesn't pertain to adult learners who really need to learn building on their experience and learning
mhm.
from each other. So that's one. The next one is happened when I started doing computer-based learning and e-learning. computer-based learning is going to take over the world. We'll never be in the classroom again. And that was just, I mean, look at today, it's hybrid. We're so hybrid. We tried, and we're tinkering with combining different ways of learning and in so many ways. And I think today there's like, you've already said it, that it's this whole concept about AI. Is it somehow it's going to do something? But we don't know what it's going to do. We don't know the questions to ask. So I think that that's kind of like where I said that the computers were going to take over the world. AI is going to take over the world. It's going to be partial. We're going to figure out how to both harness and embrace, because it's always learning like we are.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So this sort of brings us to the topic of new trends, right? I mean, what are some things in L&D that you are excited about? I mean, where do you see maybe 2 years, 5 years down the line? What can grow and what can be super helpful to the learners, to the organizations, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the new, it's not that new, but it's still new because we're trying to figure it out, is what I call learning in the flow of work.
Mhm.
And it's beyond where you could just click on something and get a little pop-up box that it gave you a definition of something. It's really where you can begin to solve a problem while you're working, engage other people, make it a very active process of learning at the time that you need to learn. And it's not just necessarily superficial of, well, how do I fill out a form? But it can be deeper about, how do I think about this problem? How do I go forward? And so I think that learning in the workplace is something that is also is something that's very exciting right now. And I also think another piece has to do with AI, is that we can now get information. Information is almost a commodity, but the question is it accurate or not?
Yeah,
But how do we bring our own, and I talked about it earlier, our own innate human capabilities to this scenario? And what are they? And how much of that can we develop in people? We've always talked about soft skills, hard skills, and probably AI maybe falls more into the, or the whole systems training falls more into the hard, and the soft, I think they blend because they have to work
yeah,
together. But I talked about curiosity. What about empathy? Communicate, different kinds of communications, um, these kinds of characteristics, and how do we develop those in people as we grow and we progress, and people learn better ways to work together. And many times it's going to be virtual. We don't know about all the different factors out there, like climate change, and how much that's going to impact on us, our abilities to travel. So we need to be thinking about these factors as we think about how people learn and how we're going to be learning together. And another piece that I personally have not really dug into before, but want to look into, is, how does the brain work? You know, we always talk about brain science, and people think, oh, well, people are all different. You know, we all learn different ways, which was really a rather revolution a while ago, that there's not one way to do everything. But look, I now have some time to be able to go into and look at, what can we take from those kinds of cognitive analyses and studies that are being done in a very different part of our practice, and bring them over to where we are. And sometimes I call this bringing theory into practice, or bringing research into practice, and figuring out how to make that happen. I see that as a very dynamic process, but it means going outside our world. It means going outside and looking at what people are doing in different areas. And that really, it's not only brain science, but it's also biology. How do these, like, you take the octopus and how they learn, and they're so brilliant. What can we learn from that we can bring into our own practice? So it's very much, I think, thinking I don't like this expression so much, but I'll use it anyway. Think out of the box, but think more broadly and incorporate some of these very cool things that are going on outside and bring them into how we look at our practice. So I think those are some very exciting things that are going on. And then of course just the power of where is, I don't see my phone right here, but using the mobile device, and
Uh,
I don't quite know how to make that a positive thing away from an addiction, but I think helping people learn how to use it right is really going to be something that's very important for us, so that people are learning, they're not scrolling.
yeah, that was a good one. Amy, this has been super amazing. So before we wrap up for today, I want to ask you one last thing. So can you share one advice for new upcoming learning and development professionals out there?
Well, one piece of advice I've already given is to be curious
Mhm.
and to be always asking questions.
Yeah.
But one thing that I learned very early on, and I was that learning's not everything. Know you're learning, but learn the business,
Wow.
so that you're going into a discussion with your client. They have a business perspective, you have a learning perspective. Really, it's us who need to cross that bridge. We can be educating them and bring them over, but we're there to help them solve a problem. And so, what is their context? What is their perspective? And what is their definition of the way they define their problem? It may not be the way that I necessarily define it. So,
Yeah.
when I was early in my career, I was so excited about how people learn. And that's what I wanted to share it with everybody. And that's not necessarily what people who wanted me to work with them and my team to work with them to create learning programs or to advance people's capabilities and their performance in the workplace. So I had to learn to really, as I said, know learning, so I could talk about it in a way that the business thought was exciting. I talked about being exciting, and that they could understand and grasp. And this is important, be able to repeat after I have left the room, because
Wow.
you want them to have those sound bites to be able to do that pull instead of that you can do the push. So it's really, as I said, know you're learning, but learn the business. And that was probably what I figured out early on, and it's kept me in good stead.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really sort of acts like a glue, right? I mean, if everyone is excited, they want to help you, they want to sort of be with you in the success, be with you in the failure, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that makes sense, and the repeatability of the thing that you have developed, that also acts as a wonderful glue. That okay, Amy had done this a few years back. That kind of recalls you and so on and so forth. That makes perfect sense. Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your experiences and wisdom with us today. And we wish you to bring again on this podcast. Hope you liked our conversation as well.
I would be very honored, and I thoroughly enjoyed discussing these topics with you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And for our listeners, if you are enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tune in for the next time for more small bites and big insights here on GydeBites. Until then, keep learning and keep growing. See you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.